On the 22nd of February 2026, Mexico's most wanted man and the leader of the feared drug cartel was killed during a security operation. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, died midway as he was taken from Tapalpa, Jalisco to the capital Mexico City after being injured in clashes between his supporters and the army. The military operation triggered violent retaliation across multiple Mexican states. Jalisco New Generation, or CJNG, drug cartel members set vehicles on fire, blocked highways and caused widespread panic. El Mencho's death marked Mexico's most significant victory in its anti-cartel campaign. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum has expelled more than 100 convicted drug kingpins to the US to appease rising demands from Donald Trump, who pressured Sheinbaum to allow American military forces in the fight against drug gangs. So far, Claudia has rejected direct US involvement but has strengthened bilateral security and intelligence cooperation. Meanwhile, President Donald Trump made a cryptic post on social media platform Truth Social and wrote, "We are winning too much. It's just not fair." So was Trump involved in the killing of Mexico's drug lord? Who is the top drug cartel leader killed in Mexico? What is CJNG cartel, Mexico's major drug trafficking player? Where do cartels acquire their firearms from? And how serious is the fentanyl crisis in America? We explore these questions and more on WION WideAngle this week.
¿Qué es lo más importante? Proteger a toda la población, proteger a la gente.
The most important thing is to protect the entire population, to protect people, to protect the public, to protect businesses, and so on. And that's what was done yesterday throughout the whole day.
Hizo ayer, durante todo el día, a lo largo de todo el día.
One of the world's most wanted drug traffickers, the Mexican cartel boss known as El Mencho, was killed by Mexican security forces. The drug lord, whose real name is Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, was killed on the 22nd of February in the western state of Jalisco, along with at least 6 alleged accomplices. The 59-year-old was the leader of a gang that in recent years had become Mexico's most powerful and notorious criminal organization called the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. El Mencho's killing caused an immediate outbreak of disorder across the region he ruled, displaying his huge influence across Mexico and other parts of Latin America. The unrest forced the US and Canadian airlines to cancel dozens of flights. Air Canada announced it was suspending flights to Puerto Vallarta due to an ongoing security situation and advised customers not to go to their airport. Eyewitness footage from Guadalajara International Airport showed travelers waiting after flights were delayed or cancelled.
We're smoky.
For the 28-year-old American traveler Natalie Belusia, a week-long trip to Mexico was expected to be relaxing. But it soon became a nightmare after security concerns in parts of Mexico left her under lockdown at her resort. Belusia said resort guests were told not to leave the property under any circumstances, leaving her feeling confined and uncertain about what comes next.
It's definitely really scary. I hope that it ends soon. This is supposed to be like a vacation, a sanctuary where everything is peaceful. And then now it's like I'm currently in a war zone. So that is really nerve-wracking. We had to cancel all of our trips that we planned for the next few days. We were going to go on a fishing trip, and we can't do that anymore because we'll be like floating ducks in the water, and it's just completely unsafe. Hopefully this ends soon. I'm not sure when it will, but we've been hearing that it's going to go on for weeks.
Following the news of El Mencho's death, cartel members set fire to businesses and vehicles and blocked highways in more than half a dozen states, paralyzing parts of the country.
Vivimos horas críticas en las que se atendieron incidentes en distintos.
We experienced critical hours in which incidents were addressed in different parts of the state and the metropolitan area. Coordination between various agencies at all levels of government was key. The main objective on this day has been to safeguard the safety of the people. Therefore, early this morning, from this security meeting, which is in permanent session, we activated Code Red, which remains in effect.
Se encuentra en sesión permanente, activamos el Código Rojo, mismo que continúa hasta este momento.
Police patrolled the capital streets as residents expressed fear and concern.
Bueno, pues una situación.
Well, it's a situation. On one hand, it's definitely a strong blow to organized crime. However, we also have to recognize that the damage they cause us as citizens is huge. For example, there are curfews, buses being burned. It's really unfortunate what's happening, and we hope the authorities soon take control of this situation.
Hay toques de queda.
Well, the truth is, the whole situation that's happening is very serious. Unfortunately, it's not the first time we're experiencing this, but this time it does seem a bit more worrying because there's no successor to these cartels. And well, we hope that truly our president does something for us, protects us, because honestly, fear is everywhere on the streets. I'm coming to work, and the truth is I come from the state of Mexico, and it's very concerning that something could happen to me on the way, on the highways.
Even in the city of Jalisco, people are concerned about the security situation following the drug lord's death.
Insecurity, for example, I live just up ahead and there's only one store open. The Guadalajara pharmacy is closed, right? And there are lines to buy things. At the butcher's, there's a huge line too. Everything is closed. People are afraid.
I hope things are going to get better, that there will be more support from the federal government so that there's more security here, both in Jalisco and in the neighboring states.
In Mexico, at least 25 members of the National Guard military police were killed in retaliatory violence in the state of Jalisco after the killing of a drug lord. According to Mexico's defense ministry, Mexico has sent 2,500 soldiers to the west of the country to bolster security.
In Jalisco, 6 attacks were recorded in which 25 members of the National Guard, a prison guard, and an officer from the State Attorney General's office sadly lost their lives. At the hands of these cowardly criminals, a woman lost her life. 30 members of organized crime, 30 criminals, were also counted among those who lost their lives in these attacks.
So we're here just outside of the Mexican state of Jalisco's capital, Guadalajara, which was marked by a surge of violence yesterday following the capture of one of the most feared cartel leaders in the country. The cartel de Jalisco New Generation, responded incredibly violently and burned buses and other vehicles like this, basically blockading roads and bringing the state and many other Mexican states to a standstill. Now, this capture was part of larger efforts by the government of Claudia Sheinbaum to crack down on cartels and effectively offset pressures by the Trump administration. But it's not provoking concerns by many people that this could produce another wave of violence in the months leading up to the World Cup that is being hosted in Mexico, the US, and Canada.
So who was El Mencho, the feared cartel leader killed in the military operation? He was considered as one of the handful of names that have had a huge impact on the history of Mexican organized crime. Born in July 1966 in the western state of Michoacan, El Mencho later moved to the United States. According to the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, he was involved in drug trafficking from the 1990s. In 1994, he was convicted in California for conspiracy to distribute heroin and served 3 years in a U.S. prison. After he returned to Mexico, El Mencho worked as a police officer in the western state of Jalisco, but soon resumed his criminal activities, building his influence in the shadowy world of narcotics. He formed and led the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or the CJNG, which was considered Mexico's most powerful cartel boss since Sinaloa kingpin Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, who was arrested in 2014. And not just Mexico's El Mencho, soon became one of the world's most wanted fugitives, with the United States alone offering a $15 million bounty for information leading to his arrest. El Mencho had a long career in brutality before forming the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. He served as chief of hitmen, or key enforcer, for the Milenio Cartel before overseeing security and operational violence for the famed Sinaloa Cartel, whose former leader Guzman is serving a life sentence in a U.S. prison. Reportedly, CJNG emerged in the 2010s from the remnants of the Milenio Cartel. His leadership benefited from the collapse of the Sinaloa Cartel after the extradition of its leader, Guzman, to the US. Subsequent battles between warring factions in Sinaloa ultimately tore the group apart. The New Generation Cartel was to dominate a significant portion of the fentanyl trade after the fall of El Chapo's sons. One of them, Joaquin Guzman Lopez, handed himself in to the US authorities and brought down his group's biggest rival, Ismael Almeo Zambada, with him. El Mencho was a clear beneficiary of the vacuum and the dramatic sequence of events in Sinaloa. CJNG is heavily involved in the production and trafficking of methamphetamine and fentanyl, with links to suppliers in China, and controls several seaports for importing chemicals. The cartel is a key supplier of illicit fentanyl to the US, reaping billions of dollars in profit, as well as being one of the main suppliers of cocaine, according to the Drug Enforcement Administration. The group has contacts in over 40 countries, including the Americas, as well as in Australia, China, and Southeast Asia, according to the US State Department. The US designated CJNG as a terrorist organization in February 2025, and El Mencho had already been indicted multiple times in US, including being charged in 2022 with conspiracy to manufacture and distribute methamphetamine, cocaine, and fentanyl for importation into the US. Mexico had been under pressure from US President Donald Trump to do more to limit the flow of drugs to the US. On the 11th of February, the Mexican Navy released footage of its members unloading seized cocaine as part of a coordinated operation with the US Coast Guard in the Pacific Ocean. The operation resulted in the seizure of 188 packages containing cocaine. A US defense official told Reuters that a new US military-led task force specializing in intelligence collection on drug cartels played a role in the Mexican military raid. The Joint Interagency Task Force Counter-Cartel, which involves multiple American government agencies, was formally launched in January 2026 with the goal of mapping out networks of drug cartel members on both sides of the US-Mexico border.
Good afternoon. Good to see all of you.
In a statement, Trump's press secretary Caroline Leavitt said that Washington provided intelligence support to the Mexican government to assist with the operation. On the 23rd of February, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum said that American forces did not participate in the operation and insisted the mission was planned and carried out solely by Mexican federal forces.
Todas las operaciones se realizan por las fuerzas PDA.
All operations are carried out by federal forces. There is no U.S. participation in the operation. What there is, as we have said here several times, is a great deal of information sharing. The understanding with the United States is based primarily on the exchange of intelligence information. In this case, the U.S. government provided information and even issued an intelligence statement, but the entire operation, from planning onwards, is the responsibility of federal forces, in this case, the Ministry of National Defense.
Es responsabilidad de las fuerzas federales, en este caso, de la Secretaría de la Defensa.
El Mencho sale, dejan un grupo.
El Mencho came out. They left behind a group with a large quantity of weapons. It really was a very violent attack carried out by the organized crime personnel, and the military special forces personnel repelled the action. 8 criminals died there in total.
Fallecen ahí en total 8 delincuentes.
A 2023-24 study in the International Journal for Crime, Justice and Social Democracy finds that Mexico's criminal landscape includes roughly 37 large cartels and more than 130 smaller affiliates as of the late 2010s to early 2020s. The 2025 National Drug Threat Assessment recognizes 6 major Mexican cartels. The largest and the most established one is the Sinaloa cartel, which is currently fractured by an internal war. El Mencho's organization, Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known for extreme violence and paramilitary structure and operations extending into Latin America, United States and multiple countries as far as Europe and Asia. Then there is Gulf Cartel, one of Mexico's oldest criminal organizations based in Tamaulipas on the US border. Originally the armed wing of the Gulf Cartel, Northeast Cartel is now independent and operating primarily in Tamaulipas and Nuevo León. La Nueva Familia Michoacana is a Michoacan-based organization that emerged from the splintering of earlier groups in that state. Then there is United Cartels, a coalition of smaller groups that formed specifically to resist CJNG expansion into Michoacan. Today, a cartel in Mexico is no longer a single firm like it was in the past. It is now a set of highly militarized networks that control territory as much as they move products. Territorial control of plazas is now essential to a cartel's 2 primary goals: profit and survival. So do cartels rely totally on drugs for profit? Reportedly, cartels for a long time have not relied solely on drugs. Mexican cartels have spent decades diversifying their empires to touch nearly every sector of the economy. It is a fact that drugs remain the foundation, but the business has expanded well beyond. Let's see where all the money comes from. Drugs, which remain the primary source, extortion, fuel theft, human and sex trafficking, arms trafficking, kidnapping, illegal resource extraction, cargo theft, and money laundering. A key component of cartel militarization is also the trafficking of US weapons into Mexico. In 2025, a report claimed that between 200,000 and 500,000 firearms are smuggled into Mexico from America. Those weapons often originate from US manufacturers and are funneled through wholesalers and retailers. In fact, after the Mexican military killed the drug cartel kingpin, Mexican officials detailed the weapons recovered in the firefights. The stockpile included a rocket-propelled grenade launcher, 10 long arms, handguns and grenades. Mexico Defense Minister Ricardo Trejo said that as with other Mexican crime scenes, about 80% of the recovered weapons were bought in the United States and smuggled across the border. Gun ownership in Mexico is tightly restricted. Reportedly, there is only one military-run gun store in the country, in Mexico City, where weapon sales are strictly regulated. But access to guns in the US has created what experts called an iron river of firearms flooding Mexico's black market. Statistics from the US Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, or the ATF, back up Mexico's figures, that the vast majority of weapons in Mexico come from the US. The ATF said 74% of the guns used in a crime were linked to an American purchaser from 2017 to 21. Mexico has long blamed US firearms for thousands of deaths in the country each year. The Mexican government in 2021 sued American gun makers, claiming they were aiding and abetting the trafficking of firearms south of the border. In 2025, the US Supreme Court ruled unanimously against the Mexican government in its attempt to hold American gun makers liable for violence and atrocities committed by Mexican drug cartels. Not just the US, China has also been reportedly involved in the Mexican drug trade. Over the last few years, China's presence in Mexico has expanded in both legal and illegal activities. But while legitimate commerce between Mexico and China is growing, Chinese groups are also becoming more engaged in drug trafficking and money laundering in Mexico. Chinese drug trafficking networks continue to be the principal suppliers of precursor chemicals for the production of methamphetamine and fentanyl to Mexican cartels that produce both drugs in Mexico. And Chinese money laundering networks have become the go-to money launderers for the Mexican cartels. From opium cultivation to precursor chemical supply, China has been quietly immersed in Mexican drug trafficking and the narcotics trade for over a century. While El Mencho's death comes as a relief for Mexico, the crisis is far from over. Cartels have survived the fall of every kingpin before him. And this time may be no different, because this is not just Mexico's problem. It is a shared regional issue that requires collective responsibility to dismantle the existing criminal infrastructure. Until such coordinated action is taken, the threat remains palpable. Another El Mencho could emerge to continue the cycle and unleash his ruthlessness.